So do you have dreams of living in a historical house? Well, now's your chance, because in this video we're going to talk to you about what it's going to take to live in a historical house and all the upkeeps and the goods and bads of it. So come on, and I'm going to show you everything about this particular house here and show you what needs to be done to make sure that you have the best life you can in one of the oldest houses in America. So has your dream ever been to own a Victorian house? Now, of course, if you're going to buy an older house and give it the love that it needs, it's always a good idea, because we need these houses to stay alive. We need these houses to stay in good condition, because this is a part of our American history. But it does come with a little bit of responsibility. For example, most of these houses were built on a crawl space. Now, I'm not going to get underneath the crawl space and get down and dirty and show you all this, but you do need to know that something like the crawl space, there's moisture. Now, with these old houses like this one that was built in 1870, it took them a couple years to build this house, but they also built it right, they built it strong, and they built it with heart pine lumber. And you're not going to find that without forking out a lot of money anymore. For example, we'll go in and show you the house with the hardwood floors inside. So historical houses like this are going to have between 2-inch and 6-inch tongue groove, heart pine, or oak flooring like this one, and they will have a subfloor of another layer of boards underneath. The cheaper, smaller houses many times did not have a subfloor, so make sure that you check and make sure that the house that you're buying has a subfloor. And of course, real wood is going to require real painting, so make sure you're willing to give it a fresh coat every 5 to 7 years to keep it in good condition. So if you find a historical house that still has the original lighting and chandeliers, these aren't gas lamps, but I wish they were, but they're probably going to have the old cotton wiring in them. Now, there's nothing wrong with cotton wiring as long as it's still working. These old houses, a lot of them still have the original wiring in them, which is just fine. But it's not going to hold as much electricity. It's not going to be able to tote the loads that most people have on a modern house these days. So you might want to figure in a budget for, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to have the house rewired to modern wiring if it hasn't already been done so. Now, of course, chandeliers and light fixtures like these, it doesn't take much to go ahead and rewire them. Now, the rest of the house, of course, is going to be a different story. So talk to a contractor and see what it's going to take to rewire the house into modern electrical components, and see if it's worth it. Alright, so back up here, I did notice that this is got a ceiling that's got some staining on it. Now, most people that don't know any better are probably going to start screaming, "Black mold!" and they're going to run like hell and never even touch the house again. But, just a little food for thought, there are hundreds of different kinds of mold, and a lot of them are black. That doesn't mean that they're the black mold that you see on TV that's killing everybody and causing a pandemic. So, stuff like this in the high moisture areas are probably going to be pretty common. Now, something like this can usually be wiped down with a spray bleach mixture, and Kilt's paint is usually pretty good about killing mold, and it's a primer, and it'll kill mold and it'll cover it up and take care of it without any incident. So, but this is the kind of thing that you're sometimes going to deal with in a historical house, especially ones that have the plank and plaster walls. You know what? Let's go to an outside wall and I'll show you. Okay, so some of the exterior walls in a historical house are going to be plank and plaster, which means they're going to have wood slats, every 1-inch wood slat all the way down the wall. And then there's going to be something that looks like kind of chicken wire or expanded metal nailed over that. And then they come in with a plaster and pretty much plaster the wall over that, and they make it smooth, and that's how they make up the walls back then. Why they call it plank and plaster. But this one looks like it's already been redone in a drywall. So if they took down the plank and plaster and replaced it with drywall, then chances are then they put insulation in the walls for the purpose of what I'm getting ready to talk about. The old plank and plaster walls did not usually have any kind of insulation. If it did, it usually probably settled down toward the bottom. So all the rest of this was exposed to the air. So if you had hot air outside and you put an air conditioner inside, cool in here, hot outside, this air would heat up against the wall and it would cause moisture. And that moisture would end up causing mold, and you would end up having to replace or paint or wipe it down, clean it up, probably every year. But like I said, this one looks good because it's already been replaced with actual drywall. So that helps in the insulation part. And the fact that they've changed it out with drywall means that they probably put insulation in the walls on this house. Okay, so some of these houses, a lot of these historical houses are going to have a second floor, and just like any second floor, it's going to get hotter upstairs. Now this one has a second floor, as you can see, and it's got a lot of creaking. So when you have a second floor, you have to account for that with your air conditioning unit. Now with the modern conveniences that we have now, you could actually, with this upper area, put in a mini split. Now that would cover, most mini splits usually cover about 900 square feet or less. So for this particular one, we've got 2 rooms, a bathroom, and then a little sub bonus room back in here. So all in all, this upper floor is probably around maybe 1,000, 1,200 square feet. And maybe I would probably say 2 mini splits would cover this entire area just fine. But if you're going to do a mini split in the upstairs, of course, there again, like I mentioned before, cool air touching the walls is going to get heated up from the outside. It's going to turn into condensation. It's going to cause moisture. So make sure that you've got good insulation throughout the area to keep the hot outside and the cool inside. Alright, so one of the things that you might want to consider before you start looking at a historical house is how you're going to get it financed. Now, some financial programs might not want to lend on a house that either A, is past a certain age, or B, needs a certain amount of repairs. Now, this is where the inspection is going to come in. If you're getting financing, they're going to order an appraisal, and some of them will mandate an inspection, but it's going to be a good idea for you to order an inspection anyway. Now, an inspection is going to have somebody, third party, look over the house, look underneath, look inside, look at the air conditioner, look at the lights, look at the plumbing, everything, and give you a better idea on what all needs to be done to the house, and then you can decide whether or not you either want to buy the house as is, have the seller do a little bit of it for you, or budget the purchase price accordingly so you can have some things done. And even if it comes back with a few issues that you might not really like but are not a big deal, you may just want to live with it. For example, this house has got the wavy glass and the old single pane windows. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and the single pane windows are within code. There's nothing wrong with them. But they are going to be drafty, and they are going to allow a lot of heat exchange. So if you want to, you might need to budget for double pane or triple pane windows, replacement windows, to go into the house. But there again, that would take away from the historical value, and you may not want that. Now, I would always encourage anybody that has a love of historical houses or has a love of woodworking, buy a historical house, keep it up, keep it loved, because we don't have a lot of these anymore. Heart pine is going for like premium, like $20 a board foot. And houses like this are full of that heart pine already sitting there. Now, there's comes some responsibility with buying a historical house. One of them is, like we said, the foundation. When you go into this foundation, most of them are going to have a crawl space, and those crawl spaces are going to have moisture. Well, when you're dealing with a house that's made of the old wood, it is tough as nails, but you still want to make sure that you every year check the crawl spaces and make sure that you get it inspected for any bugs, any moisture. Make sure that there's a vapor barrier under there, and make sure that vapor barrier is still good, because that will just help make sure that the house stays in good condition. Now, if you look at almost any house that was built back in the early 20s and 1800s, you'll notice that, and the sun's coming in on that side, so let's go over here to the other side. Give you a quick pan of what the whole porch looks like. But you'll notice that the porch is actually not level. The rail here, and this is a perfect example because the rail's straight across, it's level, but the porch is not. That's because water is going to get in here, and they were very careful to make sure that the water shed away from the house. So the porch is always going to have like a 1 in 12 grade to make sure that any rain that hits the water that hits the porch is going to slide away from the house and get away from it. That's why also a lot of the houses back then, this one's not a great example, but they usually had a pretty long eave that hung out way over the side of the house to make sure that water got away from the foundation. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're buying a historical house or a newer house. One thing that I try to make sure that everybody understands is when you're taking care of any house, you want to make sure that the house breathes, the house has ventilation. And one way to do that is to make sure that the hedges and the brush and all the tree limbs are trimmed away from the house at least a foot or two, because leaves, and you'll notice around airports, you'll notice around high traffic areas, they'll put pine trees, cedar trees, something that breaks the sound. Well, it also breaks the wind. And in areas like this, when it breaks the wind, you're breaking wind, okay. So when it's slowing the wind down, that sounds a little more palatable. When it's slowing the wind down, it's slowing the air down. That means that moisture is collecting, and this on a historical house can be real detrimental. So you want to make sure to trim the hedges away from the house so the house can breathe, so it can ventilate, so it can stay dry, and it can last longer. Alright, places you want to look at especially are the roof. Now, of course, this one looks like it's got a brand new roof on it, but if you look closer, you'll notice there's some swelling in the decking up on the roof. So these are the kind of things you want to look for when you're inspecting an older home. Now, of course, if you want an older home, you're going to have a little bit more maintenance to deal with, a little more love and tender loving care. Stuff like this right here with the steps, I have the cracks in it, that's just character. This house has been here since 1870, so if you buy anything that's Victorian or a historical house, you're going to have stuff like this where the foundation of the stairs have been settling. This right here, I would not consider this a big deal. Would keep an eye out on it, and definitely keep stuff like plant life from growing in the middle of it, because those roots, water, and all that can get in there, and eventually it'll make it worse. So just a little TLC. This is especially where an ounce of prevention is well worth a pound of cure.